Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive that's really important to all of us here at Fundamental Foundations Counseling Center in Little Elms.
We're talking all about how to support our neurodivergent teens.
And to guide this deep dive,
We're going to be taking a close look at this resource, 10 signs your neurodivergent teen needs additional support, and how to help.
awesome, and we really want to make this practical for you.
Definitely. Give you things that you can actually use and start doing right away.
Okay, so first things first,
Yeah.
can you just kind of lay the groundwork? What does it mean to be neurodivergent, and what kind of challenges might these teens be facing?
Sure. When we talk about neurodivergent, we're just simply saying that someone's brain works differently from what we might consider typical.
Got it.
That can include things like ADHD, autism, and learning disabilities.
Okay,
And, because their brains are just wired a little differently, these teenagers in particular, they can face some pretty unique challenges.
right.
Well, think about it like this, things like social interactions, or keeping up academically, or even just managing those big emotions. All of that can be way tougher when you're neurodivergent,
Right.
especially during those teenage years.
Yeah, for sure. And that's what this whole deep dive is about.
Exactly.
Recognizing the signs that your teen might need some extra support.
Yeah.
And then what can we as parents, as caregivers, as educators do to help?
So you actually help them, yeah.
So let's jump right in.
Okay.
The first sign, and this is a serious one, expressions of hopelessness or low self-esteem. Man, I imagine hearing a teenager say, I'm a failure, or nobody likes me. It's got to be heartbreaking.
Oh, absolutely. And, it can be really tough to hear those things, but it's important to remember that while some self-doubt is typical for teenagers, frequent and intense expressions of hopelessness, we shouldn't just brush those off like,
Right.
oh, it's just a phase. This is where our role as a supportive and validating parent becomes so important.
So how do we respond to those kinds of statements in a way that's helpful?
First off, validate their feelings, let your teen know you hear them and that their feelings are important. But at the same time, try to shift the focus to their strengths.
Right.
Maybe they're amazing at art, music, have a knack for building things, whatever it is. Remind them of those accomplishments.
Mm-hmm.
It can be as simple as saying, hey, I noticed you put a lot of effort into that drawing, and I'm really proud of you for sticking with it.
Yeah.
Those little validations can go a long way.
So it's about acknowledging their struggles, but then also reminding them of their worth.
Exactly. And if those expressions of hopelessness continue or get worse, seeking professional help, that's so important.
Right.
A therapist can give your teen the tools to cope,
Mm-hmm.
and they can also help uncover any underlying mental health challenges that might be at play.
That makes total sense. Always better to err on the side of caution. Let's move on to the second sign. Risky or impulsive behaviors. We all know teenagers can be impulsive.
Yeah.
When is it a sign of something more?
Well, I think the key here is looking for patterns of behavior that are out of character for your teen.
Okay.
We're talking about things like suddenly engaging in dangerous activities or acting without thinking of the consequences or even showing aggression that seems to come out of nowhere.
Okay, so it's really a matter of degree
It is.
and knowing your teen's baseline.
Precisely. Now, this is especially important for teens with ADHD
Mm-hmm.
because impulsivity is a common characteristic of that diagnosis. Imagine their brain like a car without brakes. That's what it can feel like
Wow.
when you're struggling with impulse control. So having those clear boundaries and consequences, that's crucial.
Right.
But here's the thing. We've got to do it in a way that's supportive and understanding. Because remember, they're not necessarily being defiant. They genuinely might be struggling to control those impulses.
So it's about teaching them how to manage those impulses.
Exactly. You're teaching them to pump the brakes, so to speak.
I like that.
One helpful technique is to role-play different scenarios. This gives them a chance to practice those decision-making skills in a safe environment. You can even make it fun. Turn it into a game.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Okay, let's talk about sign number 3. Increased rigidity or need for control. This one seems counterintuitive. Wouldn't a lack of control be more of a concern?
It might seem that way, but rigidity, especially in our neurodivergent teens, it's often a sign of anxiety. Think about it. When the world feels overwhelming or unpredictable, clinging to routines, to predictable outcomes, that can be a way of creating a sense of safety.
Oh, so it's about control.
And control, yeah. So instead of just labeling them as stubborn or difficult, we need to recognize that this behavior might stem from a deeper need for stability and predictability,
All right.
and meeting that need can be incredibly empowering. So instead of forcing change, try incorporating things like visual schedules.
Okay.
prepping them for transitions in advance.
Yeah.
It's like giving them a roadmap
Okay.
to navigate their day.
So what I'm hearing is it's about giving them tools rather than trying to force them to suppress or just get over it.
Right. What about choices? Have you ever thought about offering choices?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like even small choices can make a big difference, right?
It can. Small choices can give them a sense of agency and control. So instead of just saying, time to clean your room, do you want to clean your room now or after dinner? It's a small tweak, but it can make a world of difference.
Yeah, for sure. We've talked a lot about anxiety. Is it common for neurodivergent teens to struggle with anxiety?
It definitely is. In fact, anxiety disorders are much more prevalent in neurodivergent populations.
Hmm.
And if anxiety is a major factor, seeking guidance from a therapist who specializes in anxiety disorders, that can be incredibly helpful.
Okay.
They can teach coping skills, help process emotions, and create that safe space for your teen
So important.
to explore their anxieties.
Yeah. Okay, that leads perfectly into our next sign, frequent physical complaints. This one doesn't seem as directly related to neurodiversity. Why is it on the list?
Well, because physical symptoms like headaches, stomach aches, or even muscle tension, these can often be linked to stress or even sensory processing issues, both of which are very common in our neurodivergent teens. It's their body's way of signaling that something's just not quite right.
So instead of dismissing them as faking it or being dramatic, we need to dig a little deeper.
Exactly. Of course, it's always important to rule out any underlying medical conditions with a doctor.
Right.
But if those physical symptoms persist and no medical cause is found, it's time to explore the possibility of stress or those sensory sensitivities being the root cause.
That makes a lot of sense.
Okay.
So let's say a parent suspects that their teen's headaches are related to stress.
Okay.
What are some practical things that they can do?
Well, mindfulness techniques, things like deep breathing or meditation, those can work wonders for reducing stress-related symptoms. Another thing to look at is their sensory environment at home. Is it chaotic and overwhelming, or is it calm and soothing?
Okay.
Sometimes simple adjustments like dimming the lights or reducing clutter or using calming scents, those can make a huge difference.
It's amazing how interconnected everything is.
It is.
Mental health, physical health, environment. Okay, sign number 5, heightened sensory sensitivities. I know this is a big one, especially with autism.
You're right. Sensory sensitivities are extremely common, particularly those on the autism spectrum.
Okay.
They might be super sensitive to things like noise, bright lights, certain textures, strong smells, or even particular tastes.
So it's almost like they're constantly bombarded by stimulation.
That's a great way to put it. And that's why the first step is to identify those triggers. Pay attention to what seems to bother your teen, and then brainstorm ways to minimize their exposure to those things.
So let's get practical. What are some tools or strategies?
Okay, so noise-canceling headphones can be a lifesaver in those noisy environments. If touch is an issue, try experimenting with different fabrics and textures to find what feels comfortable. And for teens who crave that deep pressure stimulation, weighted blankets can be incredibly calming.
Oh yeah, I love weighted blankets.
They're great.
What about professional help? When do we consider something like occupational therapy?
If those sensory sensitivities are significantly impacting your teen's life, making it hard for them to function at school, participate in activities, that's when you really want to consult an occupational therapist.
Okay.
They specialize in sensory processing issues and can create a tailored plan to help your teen manage those sensitivities. Think of them as sensory detectives, figuring out what's going on and how to best support your teen's needs.
Okay, I love that. So on to sign number 6, withdrawal from friends or family. I mean, all teenagers need their space, right?
Right.
How do you know when it's more than just teenage angst?
It's all about looking for changes in their usual social behavior. If your typically outgoing teen is suddenly spending most of their time alone
Okay.
or starts actively avoiding social events they used to enjoy, that's when you might want to dig a little deeper.
So what are some of the reasons behind this withdrawal from social connections?
Well, it could be a number of things. Social anxiety, which is common in our neurodivergent teens, could be playing a role. They might feel overwhelmed or stressed in social situations.
Yeah.
It could also be related to sensory overload. Remember, for some of these teens, crowds, noise, or even just the demands of social interaction can feel like an assault on their senses. So it's natural to withdraw when you're feeling overwhelmed. And sometimes it might be a sign that they're struggling to maintain those relationships because of the challenges that come with neurodiversity.
Oh, it makes sense.
They might be having a hard time picking up on social cues or just navigating those complexities of social dynamics.
Right. Yeah. So let's talk solutions. What
Yeah.
can we as parents do to help? I imagine like trying to force them to be more social could really backfire.
Absolutely. A gentle approach is key. Encourage those one-on-one interactions
Right.
in low-pressure settings. Maybe suggest grabbing ice cream with a close friend or going for a walk with a family member.
Yeah.
Choose activities that your teen enjoys that won't feel too overwhelming. It's about building their confidence and those comfort levels gradually.
I love that.
It's all about those baby steps,
Yeah.
right?
Baby steps.
Yeah.
What about role playing?
Ah, role-playing social scenarios.
Yeah, like I remember doing that as a kid, and it was actually kind of fun.
That's a fantastic idea. Role-playing can be a really effective way
Mm-hmm.
to practice those social skills in a safe environment. You
Right.
can act out different situations, that they might encounter, helping them learn how to initiate those conversations or respond to questions, and even deal with those, tricky social situations that can feel so awkward. It's like giving them a dress rehearsal for real-life interactions.
Yeah, I love that. And again, I'm sure professional help could be really beneficial in these situations too.
Absolutely. They can provide guidance on navigating those tricky social dynamics and can also address any underlying anxiety or social anxieties that might be feeding into the withdrawal. Having a professional in their corner can make a world of difference.
Yeah, it really can.
Speaking of academics, let's move on to sign number 7. Difficulty keeping up academically. This is a common one, right?
Oh, absolutely. School can be a real battle for these teens. Why is it so challenging for them?
A few things at play. A lot of neurodivergent teens have trouble with what we call executive functioning.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that. Can you break that down for us?
Sure, executive functioning. It's like the air traffic control system of the brain. It helps us to plan, organize, stay focused, and manage our time. And, these skills are essential for school, but can be a real struggle for teens with ADHD, autism, even other neurodevelopmental conditions.
So it's not that they aren't intelligent, their brains are wired differently, which impacts how they approach school.
Exactly. It's like they have all the ingredients for a cake, but they're having trouble following the recipe.
Yeah.
They might struggle to get started on assignments or break down those big tasks into smaller steps or stay on track with their work. They might also have a hard time with working memory, which makes it difficult to remember instructions or recall information.
Oh, that makes sense. So what can parents do
Uh-huh.
to help their teen who's struggling?
Well, the first thing I recommend is talking with the school about possible accommodations.
Okay.
A 504 plan or an individualized education program, what we call an IEP, can provide the support your teen needs to succeed.
Can you explain those a little bit more?
Sure. A 504 plan, that's a legal document that outlines accommodations and modifications to make sure students with disabilities have equal access to education.
Got it.
An IEP is similar, but it's specifically for students who need special education services.
Okay, so these plans, would they include things like extra time on tests or preferential seating or even like modified assignments?
Absolutely. They can also give your teen access to assistive technology like
All right.
text-to-speech software or organizational apps. It's all about leveling the playing field, right?
Yeah, making sure that everyone has the tools that they need.
And that the plans are tailor-made to fit each student's individual needs.
Yeah, and no two students are alike, so
Exactly.
their needs are going to be different.
Absolutely. Outside of the school setting, parents can also implement some tools and strategies at home,
Right.
to help their teens stay organized and manage their time effectively.
Yeah, like what?
Things like visual schedules, timers, color-coded folders, those can be incredibly helpful,
I can see that.
especially for our neurodivergent learners.
Yeah, very visual.
Absolutely. What about hiring a tutor or an educational therapist?
Yeah, do you recommend that?
That can be a game changer, especially if they specialize in working with neurodivergent learners.
Okay.
They can offer that one-on-one support, teach your teens strategies to tackle academic challenges, and help them develop those self-advocacy skills.
Yeah.
It's like having a personalized coach in their corner.
That's awesome. Okay, so moving right along, we're to sign number 8, changes in sleep patterns. We all know teenagers need their sleep,
Right?
but why? Why are changes in sleep patterns a particular concern for this group?
Well, for starters, many neurodivergent teens experience sleep problems just because of their underlying conditions.
Yeah.
For example, teens with ADHD, they often struggle to fall asleep,
Yeah.
because of those racing thoughts, the hyperactivity.
Right.
And teens with autism might have sensory sensitivities that make it really hard to get comfortable or stay asleep,
Yeah.
So it's not just typical teenage sleepiness, it's something that really requires our attention.
Right.
What's even more concerning is that these sleep problems can make those other challenges worse. Lack of sleep can amplify those attention problems,
Hmm.
increase impulsivity, even lead to more frequent emotional outbursts.
So it's kind of a vicious cycle.
It can be, yeah. That's why it's so important to establish healthy sleep habits early on, right?
So what are some tips for parents who are trying to help their teen get a good night's sleep?
Consistency is key.
Okay.
That means setting a regular bedtime and wake-up time, even on the weekends. It helps regulate their natural sleep-wake cycle.
I know this is a tough one, but what about screen time?
Oh, that's a big one. That blue light emitted from screens can interfere with melatonin production, making it
Mm.
harder to fall asleep. So try to limit that screen time in the hour or two before bed.
Oh,
Encourage your teen to read a book,
yeah.
listen to some calming music, take a relaxing bath.
So it's all about creating a calming, sleep-conducive environment.
Exactly. Make sure their bedroom is dark, quiet, and cool. You might consider using blackout curtains to block out any light, and maybe a white noise machine to minimize distractions.
I love those practical tips.
Good.
Now, what if those efforts don't work?
If those sleep problems continue to persist, it's important to consult a doctor.
Oh, yeah.
There might be an underlying medical condition like sleep apnea that needs to be addressed.
All right, that makes sense. Moving on to sign number 9, avoidance of school or activities. This feels tricky, especially if your teen isn't great at communicating what's bothering them.
It can be, and when a neurodivergent teen suddenly starts avoiding school or activities they used to love, it's a big red flag that something is up.
So what are some of the possible reasons?
Anxiety is a common culprit.
Mm-hmm.
It could be that general anxiety about school or a specific phobia related to those certain activities.
Makes sense.
We talked about social anxiety, and that can definitely play a role too.
Yeah,
And sadly, bullying is always a possibility as well.
that's true.
Sadly, neurodivergent teens are often targets of bullying,
Yeah.
which can make school a very stressful and unpleasant place to be.
Yeah, for sure. So how can parents approach this with their teen? It seems like finding the right words is crucial.
Absolutely. It's about creating a safe space,
Mm-hmm.
a non-judgmental space for your teen to open up.
Okay.
Start by simply asking how they're feeling
Okay.
about school or those specific activities. And if they're hesitant to talk, don't push too hard. Just let them know you're there for them
Yeah.
and that you're ready to listen when they are.
Sometimes just knowing that you're not alone is
It can make a world of
a
difference.
huge help. Yeah.
It really can. Once you have a better understanding of what's going on, then you can start to work together
Okay.
to find solutions. If anxiety is the root cause, a therapist can teach your teen those coping mechanisms to manage those feelings. And if bullying is an issue, it's crucial to address it,
Right.
Head on with the school.
Yeah.
Working together to create a safe and supportive environment, that's essential.
Yeah. And speaking of working with the school, what about working with them to maybe create some accommodations that might, ease some of that anxiety or stress?
That's a fantastic idea. If sensory overload is contributing to the avoidance, for example, the school might be able to create a quiet space
Mm-hmm.
where your kin can take breaks
Yeah.
or allow them to wear noise-canceling headphones during certain activities.
Right.
If social anxiety is making it hard to participate in group projects, maybe they can offer alternative ways for your teen to contribute.
I love that.
It's all about finding those creative solutions to meet their individual needs.
Yeah. Okay, so the last sign on the list, increased emotional outbursts or meltdowns. This is something that I know so many parents of neurodivergent teens struggle with.
It's a very common challenge, so I can imagine it can be incredibly frustrating
Mm,
for both the teen and the parent.
right, right. Why are these meltdowns so common? Are they just more emotional?
It's not quite that simple. It really comes down to difficulty regulating emotion and managing stress. Neurodivergent teens often experience the world in a much more intense way
Hmm.
than their neurotypical peers. They might be highly sensitive to sensory input or struggle with social situations or have a hard time adapting to change, all of these factors can really contribute to that emotional overload, which can then manifest as outbursts or meltdowns.
So it's not that they're intentionally trying to be difficult.
Right.
It's just that they're processing things differently.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that meltdowns are not a choice.
Okay.
They're a sign that your teen is overwhelmed
Yeah.
and desperately needs our help
To regulate those emotions.
to regulate their emotions, yeah.
So what can parents do in the heat of the moment when their teen is having a meltdown?
Well, the first and most important thing is to stay calm yourself.
I know that's easier said than done.
It is, but it's so crucial. Your teen is already in a state of dysregulation, so if you get upset or angry, it's only going to escalate the situation.
So you're saying match their energy almost.
Not necessarily match it, but just be that calm presence
Okay.
that can actually help them regulate their own emotions. It's like being a steady anchor in a stormy sea.
I love that visual.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of reacting, what should parents do?
Focus on creating a safe and calming environment. If possible, move your teen to a quiet space where they can de-escalate, get away from any of those triggers or stimulation.
Okay. What about talking to them? Is that helpful?
You know, during a meltdown, probably not. During a meltdown, their brain is essentially in fight or flight mode, which means they're not able to really process language effectively. So instead of trying to reason with them, just focus on providing that nonverbal comfort, like a gentle touch or just your presence. Sometimes the best thing you can do is just be there with them, offering that silent support.
Just that sense of security and safety.
Exactly. And once they've calmed down, then you can talk about what happened and help them identify those triggers. This can be a really valuable learning experience for both of you.
And what about teaching them self-regulation skills?
Oh, absolutely.
Are there things that they can learn to do to better manage those big emotions?
Yeah, absolutely. There are so many techniques that can help.
Like what?
Deep breathing exercises, mindfulness practices, sensory strategies like using a weighted blanket, listening to calming music. Those can all be incredibly effective.
I love those.
It's about giving them a toolbox of coping skills they can use whenever they're feeling overwhelmed.
That's so important. And I imagine a therapist can also help with that process.
Absolutely. If those meltdowns are frequent or severe, seeking professional help, that's a must.
Right.
A therapist can help your teen develop those coping mechanisms, address any underlying mental health issues, and even work with you to create a plan for managing those challenging behaviors.
Amazing. Wow, this has been so informative.
Good.
We've covered so much. But before we wrap up, I'd love to get your thoughts on the bigger picture. What are some general tips for parents who are raising neurodivergent teens?
One of the most important things to remember is that neurodiversity is not a deficit. It's just a different way of thinking and experiencing the world.
So instead of focusing on what your teen can't do, focus on what they can do.
Exactly. Celebrate their strengths, those unique abilities.
Oh, bye.
Neurodivergent teens often possess incredible strengths like creativity, out-of-the-box thinking, a unique perspective that can bring so much value to the world. It's all about nurturing those strengths and helping them find their path. Right?
Speaking of finding their path, I know a lot of parents worry about the future.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to those parents?
I would say focus on building their confidence and their independence. Equip them with the tools and skills they need to advocate for themselves, navigate those challenges, and celebrate their unique way of being in the world. And remember, you don't have to do this alone. There are so many resources available to support both your teen and you as a family. Connect with other parents of neurodivergent teens, join support groups, and don't hesitate to reach out to professionals when needed.
Speaking of resources, our listeners can find a ton of information on our website at Fundamental Foundations Counseling Center. We have links to support groups, organizations that specialize in neurodiversity, and even a link to that original article that inspired this whole deep dive.
And if you're feeling overwhelmed or unsure where to turn, please don't hesitate to reach out to a mental health professional. They can provide that guidance and support as you navigate this journey.
I love that. So it's about empowering the teen, empowering the parent.
Absolutely.
With knowledge, resources, support.
It takes a village, right?
It really does. This has been such a valuable conversation. I know I've learned a lot, and I hope our listeners have too.
Me too. It's been a pleasure sharing this information.
Before we wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with a thought-provoking question to ponder.
Okay.
What unique strengths does your neurodivergent teen possess? And how can you help them nurture those strengths?
Yeah.
So that they can really, shine brightly in their own way?
That's a wonderful question. And remember, every teen, neurodivergent or not, has the potential to thrive. With the right support, understanding, and a lot of love, they can overcome challenges and lead fulfilling lives.
Yeah, that's a powerful message. Every teen has that potential.
And sometimes it just takes a little extra support to help them
To unlock it, yeah.
unlock it.
It's okay to ask for help.
Oh, reaching out for support, that's a sign of strength, not weakness.
Huh.
There are so many people, amazing organizations out there ready to help these teens and families
To thrive.
thrive.
Yeah. This whole deep dive has really opened my eyes to the unique challenges that neurodivergent teens face. And it's all about meeting those challenges with compassion.
And a willingness to learn,
Yeah.
to adapt.
To adapt, right?
Yeah.
And to shift our perspective from seeing this as a problem.
To seeing it as a beautiful difference.
A difference
Yeah.
that enriches our world.
That enriches our world. So to all the parents out there, caregivers, educators, supporting neurodivergent teens, you're doing amazing work. Keep learning, keep advocating, and keep believing in those kiddos.
You are not alone.
We're all in this together.
We are. Supporting neurodivergent teens, it's a collective effort. And together, we can create a world where every young person feels seen, heard, and empowered
To reach their full potential.
to reach their full potential.
Sure.
That's it for this deep dive. We'll see you next time
See ya.
for another fascinating exploration. Until then, stay curious.